Right now, crossing an ocean is almost boring. You board a plane, put in your headphones, fall asleep, and wake up on another continent. Thousands of miles of open water beneath you the entire time, and you never once think about how impossible that would have been for almost anyone who ever lived before you. But long before boats, before sails, before anyone had the slightest idea how to build a vessel that could survive open water, something crossed those same oceans anyway. And it wasn't even us, because crossing open water isn't a modern human achievement. It's older than Homo sapiens itself, older than complex tools, quite possibly older than language. Some hominin species crossed deep, permanent ocean barriers over 1 million years ago, with a brain a third the size of yours and no evidence they'd ever built so much as a raft on purpose. In August 2025, archaeologists working at a site called Callao on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi announced something that rewrote the map of early human migration. They uncovered stone tools dated to at least 0.4 million years old, sitting on an island that has never, at any point in Earth's history, been connected to the Asian mainland by dry land, even during the deepest ice ages when sea levels dropped dramatically. This stretch of ocean is part of what's called the Wallace Line, a permanent deep water barrier that most land mammals have never been able to cross. Whoever made those tools got there by water, over 1 million years before Homo sapiens existed as a species, using a brain and a toolkit nowhere close to what we'd consider seafaring technology. Archaeologist Adam Brum, who worked on the discovery, suspects the most likely explanation is almost accidental. Hominins swept out to sea on natural rafts of floating vegetation, torn loose by a storm or a tsunami, drifting for who knows how long before washing up somewhere they were never trying to reach. So the question is, if that crossing really happened, did whoever survived it actually make it somewhere permanent? It looks like they did, and the proof is one of the strangest discoveries in the story of human evolution. On the nearby island of Flores, researchers have found stone tools at a site called Wolo Sehe dating back at least 1.02 million years, meaning hominins reached Flores at almost exactly the same time as Sulawesi, across an equally deep, equally permanent stretch of open water. Whoever landed there didn't just survive the crossing. They stayed, and over hundreds of thousands of years of complete isolation, their descendants evolved into something almost unrecognizable, Homo floresiensis, nicknamed the Hobbits, a species that stood barely over 3 feet tall with a brain roughly the size of a grapefruit, discovered in 2003 in the cave of Liangbua. An entire human species, quietly shrinking on an island for 1 million years, exists because its ancestors survived a sea crossing nobody thinks they were capable of, using technology nobody thinks should have worked. Here's why that matters. This wasn't a one-time fluke either. Further north, on the island of Luzon in the Philippines, archaeologists have found stone tools and butchered animal bones dated to between 631,000 and 777,000 years old, evidence of yet another isolated hominin population, later identified as an entirely separate species, Homo luzonensis. Multiple islands, multiple crossings, multiple isolated populations, all separated from the mainland by open water, all appearing hundreds of thousands of years before anyone had figured out how to build a boat on purpose. And it isn't confined to Southeast Asia either. On the island of Crete in the Mediterranean, researchers led by Thomas Strasser found stone hand axes at a site called Plakias, in deposits estimated to be well over 130,000 years old, and potentially far older. Crete has been surrounded by deep water for at least 5 million years, meaning it was never reachable on foot under any sea level conditions at any point in its entire history. Whoever left those tools there crossed a genuine permanent sea barrier in the Mediterranean using exactly the same kind of impossible method as the hominins in Wallachia, thousands of kilometers away, with no contact between the two groups whatsoever. This wasn't a single lucky accident confined to one archipelago. It looks like an entire pattern of hominins repeatedly, independently, ending up on the far side of open water they had no business crossing. So if all of that happened essentially by accident, when did humans actually start crossing oceans on purpose? That shift happens with our own species, and it happens far more recently. Around 65,000 years ago, based on artifact layers found at the Majid Bibi rock shelter in northern Australia, Homo sapiens made the crossing into Sahul, the ancient landmass connecting Australia and New Guinea. Unlike the earlier crossings, this one couldn't have been an accident. Even during the lowest sea levels of the last ice age, the shortest possible route route across Wallachia still required crossing at least 90 kilometers of open ocean, with land visible on neither end for much of the journey. No storm accidentally sweeps an entire viable population, including women capable of founding a new one, in one coordinated direction across that much open water. This crossing needed real watercraft, real planning, and almost certainly multiple deliberate journeys. So here's the assumption most people carry into this topic, that ocean crossings were always the product of intention, skill, and purpose-built technology, that no one crosses deep water without deliberately setting out to do it. The evidence flips that completely. The very first ocean crossings in the human story, over 1 million years before Homo sapiens existed, appear to have been almost entirely accidental. Hominins swept out on debris during a storm, with no ability to steer, no idea where they were going, and no way back if it failed. It took roughly 1 million years after that first accidental crossing for our own species to finally do it on purpose, at Sahul, with actual planning behind it. Intentional seafaring isn't the origin of ocean crossing. It's the very late upgrade to something that started as pure, terrifying chance. Think about what that actually implies. It means the ability to end up somewhere completely new, isolated, and untouched, didn't require intelligence, planning, or even the desire to go anywhere at all. It just required surviving. A hominin with a brain a fraction of the size of yours, with no map, no destination, and no say in the matter, still managed to found an entirely new lineage of humans on the other side of the planet, purely by refusing to drown. Everything that came after, the rafts, the canoes, the compasses, the planes, was just humanity slowly turning that one accident into something we could finally control on purpose. So let's put the timeline together. About 1.04 million years ago, at Callao on Sulawesi, an unknown hominin species crossed permanent open water, almost certainly by accident. Around 1.02 million years ago, a similar accidental crossing reached Flores, eventually producing the hobbits. Somewhere between 777,000 and 631,000 years ago, another isolated crossing reached Luzon in the Philippines, while a completely separate population was doing the exact same thing on Crete, on the other side of the world. And it wasn't until roughly 65,000 years ago, at Sahul, that our own species finally crossed open water on purpose, with real intention and real watercraft behind the journey. You can still feel a distant echo of that instinct today. Every time you look at a distant coastline, a horizon, a place you've never been, and feel that specific pull to go see what's actually there. That restlessness, the urge to cross into the unknown, even when it's genuinely risky, isn't a personality quirk. And it isn't even exclusively a human one. It's a very old inheritance from creatures who crossed oceans with nothing but driftwood and no guarantee of ever reaching land, whose descendants kept doing it on purpose, again and again, refining the method every single time, until eventually someone built you a plane so you wouldn't have to gamble at all.